This video is Unit 4, Part 3, continuing to talk more about the nervous system. In this particular video, we're going to be looking at how the nerve impulse crosses the synapse. Remember, we talked about the synapse being a space between two cells, one being the axon terminal, the other being some sort of effector cell. Could be muscle, could be an organ, could be another nerve. Nonetheless, some sort of effector cell. And so this picture here kind of gives you a better idea of what's going on. And I'll just walk through this step by step. So the first thing that happens is the axon, or the action potential, it's traveling down this here axon. And remember, the action potential is an electrical impulse. And so this signal at this point is electrical still. We've talked about that. The sodium goes in, depolarizes the cell, potassium goes out, repolarizes the membrane. And this thing happens back and forth, and that nerve impulse is propagating down the length of that axon. And so just to draw a different representation of this, here's this axon, and here's the action potential traveling down the length of the nerve. Now, in the axon terminal, there are these gates on the outside, and they are particular to a certain ion called calcium. These are calcium gates. Calcium's built up on the outside of the axon terminal. The action potential causes those gates to open. Once those gates open, calcium that is on the outside in high concentrations is going to flood into the inside of the axon terminal. Opens the gates, the calcium comes in. Inside the axon terminal are these vesicles. Remember, we've talked about vesicles before, and vesicles are temporary storage units, and they could be storing any number of things. In this case, they're going to be storing a chemical, and we've talked about that chemical also. That chemical is called neurotransmitter. In this case, neurotransmitter is little red dots. Some sort of neurotransmitter. We could give it a name, but there's no reason to at this point. Neurotransmitter. And the neurotransmitters contain these vesicles. We've talked about how materials are transported to the outside of the cell. Remember, Golgi body and all that sort of thing. So you can imagine these vesicles are coming from the Golgi. Alright, so let's get these pieces out of the way so we can deal with this. Well, the calcium is going to cause those vesicles full of neurotransmitter to be pushed to the edge of the axon terminal. And when that happens, the vesicle is going to fuse with the membrane, causing the contents of that vesicle to be emptied into the synapse. Alright, and you get the idea. So over here we have some sort of effector cell, and on that effector cell there are some channels as well. Now these are ion gated channels, meaning they are gates that only open when they form, or only open when they come in contact with this neurotransmitter. I'll show you a picture of that here. And so here's, and I said ion-gated channels. These are ligand-gated ion channels. They're ligand-gated because the ligand is the signal molecule that's going to open the gate. They're ion channels because they're going to allow an ion in. So here's the neurotransmitter, the little green dot. It's going to bind with the gate. The gate is going to open up. When the neurotransmitter leaves, the gate closes. And so the neurotransmitter is going to bind with these gates, and there's an ion that is outside this effector cell waiting to go in. You could probably guess what that ion is. It's sodium. Sodium is going to go into the cell, It's going to cause the membrane to depolarize, causing an action potential, and that action potential is going to propagate itself into the effector cell. So effectively what happens in this process is the signal is converted from electrical here to chemical in the synapse back to electrical on the effector cell. And so this way the effector cell does not directly come in contact with the axon, is not injured, and the signal is able to jump across that synapse using the neurotransmitter. Speaking of neurotransmitters, there are several kinds of neurotransmitters that we'll look at. The main, or the most important and the most widespread neurotransmitter in the body is called acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is an excitatory neurotransmitter. There are two kinds, excitatory or inhibitory. The excitatory cause things to happen. The inhibitory cause things to stop happening. Acetylcholine is the neurotransmitter involved in skeletal muscle contraction. And so it is very important all of your muscles are contracting because acetylcholine is working on them. A couple of other types of neurotransmitters called biogenic amines. They're just called that because of this amino group here. And these are common things that you've probably heard of. Norepinephrine and then epinephrine. These are released by the adrenaline gland. These are excitatory hormones, and they cause the heart rate to speed up, metabolism, breathing, these sorts of things to speed up. This causes the fight or flight response in the body. If you're scared or excited about something, it causes you to get amped up so that you can deal with that thing. Think of a survival type mechanism. This sheet also lists inhibitory, but for our purposes, we're going to think of them as being excitatory neurotransmitters. Then you have dopamine and serotonin. These two work against each other. Dopamine is oftentimes referred to as the happy neurotransmitter. It causes you to feel pleasure, or when you feel pleasure, your body or your brain releases this, and you have a association with that. For instance, people like to eat chocolate, and it makes them feel good, and therefore they want to feel good, so they go eat more chocolate, and that makes them feel good. So this is a constant cycle. People can have this with chocolate, or they can have this with illegal drugs, and so this is one of the reasons why. This is one of the things that can cause addictions. Serotonin is the opposite. It is oftentimes called your sleep neurotransmitter, and it causes you to feel asleep, and so or to feel sleepy, or to feel down, and so. As you could guess, the balance between this happy, sleepy thing, if there's any problem or lack of balance between these two neurotransmitters, there can be problems in the brain. This oftentimes leads to things like manic depression, or bipolar disorder, depression, ADHD, schizophrenia. Any number of mental conditions can be associated with an imbalance in these neurotransmitters, and a lot of psychotropic drugs attempt to deal with those imbalances. A couple others that we'll look at here. Substance P is an excitatory neurotransmitter that deals with a pain stimulus. Endorphins, that's a big old name here, we're not that worried about it. Endorphins, these are substances like morphine and heroin that have long been used in the medical community to deal with pain. And so substance P is a pain transmitter. Your body uses that to transmit pain. Pain is a good thing as far as your body's concerned. It tells you something's wrong. And then the endorphins turn that off. And so those two things can be working hand in hand as well.